Probando, 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 probando. Probando, probando. Un, dos, tres. Probando, un, dos, tres.
Y Wellesley Morris. Wellesley Morris, ¿esto está funcionando? ¿Sí? Bueno. Wellesley Morris es un crítico de cine que trabaja en este momento como crítico cultural de cine y deportivo para una publicación en Boston que se llama Grantland. Trabajó por muchos años para el Boston Globe, donde se ganó un Pulitzer Prize. Y Raoul Peck, no sé si entre ustedes necesita introducción, pero yo sí quisiera agradecerle a la Embajada de Francia en Colombia y a la Cinémathèque Afrique, Institut Francés. Me imagino que es la Cinemateca Africana del Instituto Francés. Gracias a ellos tenemos el gran honor y privilegio de tener a Raoul Peck con nosotros en Cartagena. Gracias a Raúl por venir. Gracias a tu presencia, Raúl. En Cartagena podemos hacer una retrospectiva de la obra del director que sorprendentemente, pues ninguna prácticamente de sus películas se había mostrado en el pasado en el país. Yo pienso que así la obra de Raúl, quien se preocupa sobre todo por temas sociales y políticos, ha estado basada en países como Haití, como el Congo, como Ruanda, tiene una resonancia importante en Colombia, sobre todo en una ciudad como Cartagena. Entonces, sí, me parece que es un absoluto privilegio y les recomiendo que vean la mayor cantidad de películas posibles en su retrospectiva y los dejo entonces aquí con este diálogo. Vamos a necesitar entonces traducción simultánea, va a ser en inglés la charla, will be in English.
Sí. That's the most Spanish that I'm going to speak today, so sorry. Can you guys hear okay? Okay. So, hi Raoul.
Hi, my dear.
How are you? So I figured it might be useful to sort of start with, we can sort of walk through your progression as a filmmaker a little bit. And maybe we'll start with the film that showed last night, Fatal Assistance, and then go backwards from there maybe. So you were born in Haiti, but you lived in the Democratic Republic of Congo. For how you grew up there, basically, is that correct?
I grew up between Congo. I think it's not working.
Try that.
Okay. I grew up between Congo, France, the United States. Depending on what was happening, my father was working for the UN in Congo at a period of time where it was quite difficult there politically. Mm-hmm. So sometimes we have been evacuated to New York. So I went to school in New York, and then
in Brooklyn. Is that
in
is
Brooklyn,
that right? Okay.
In Brooklyn. I did 1 or 2 years in school there, and came back to Congo, and then went to France.
Okay, so I just wanted to give a sense of just how well-traveled you are, and how, just to sort of clarify some other things before we get into the filmmaking. So at some point, when you were being educated in Orléans, is that right? And then Leopoldville and Brooklyn, but at some point when you went to study in Berlin, you studied, was it engineering?
Economy and engineering.
Okay.
Well, I have a very weird biography. I think I have the biography of many Haitians of the time. My father belongs to the generation who start leaving Haiti. He was a professor at the Faculty of Agronomy and was arrested early on by the Duvalier regime, and so twice. So he thought that he would probably not survive a third time. And at the same time, as his story sometimes brings very strange consequences, the Congo was looking for academics, for professionals to replace the Belgian That was the beginning of the 60s.
Right.
And so there, in Haiti came a lot of recruiters from the UN to recruit professionals to go work in Congo. So my father was part of this first generation who went to Africa, who went to Congo, who went to Canada, who went to the United States.
So that was the beginning of this diasporic Haitian.
Exactly. And later years, the exile became more and more, you know, for the whole country. You got peasant, poor people leaving the country, the famous boat people, as they were called. But to come back to my youth between all those countries is that I never felt that I was in exile. I just grew up in all those places at the same time. There were always Haitian wherever I lived. In Congo, there was a huge Haitian community. In New York, of course, you know, I remember my days in Brooklyn. There was, you know, a real Haitian community. Some of them, you know, working in factories, in hospitals, and I remember my uncle's house where there were at least 6 families living there.
Yeah.
So it's I see it as an advantage to have grown up in all those places at the same time.
Right.
And,
so that's what I wanted to get at. And just to sort of finish this, you also, did you drive a cab?
Oh, that was later on.
That was, you were an adult?
So that everybody knows that after I finished my school in Orléans in France, and then I knew for some reason that I didn't have a real future in France. All my comrades knew already where they were going to study, what they were going to do, depending on what social class they were coming from. And nowhere I saw something marked Haitian where, you know, they would be expecting me. So at the time, I just wanted to change, and my father thought, you know, to be an engineer would be something fundamental, solid.
Did you believe that?
So, well, I was not in a position really, you know, I trust him.
Right?
And he said, Germany is good, you know, and so I negotiated, because I say, okay, Germany, but then Berlin, because I knew Berlin was really a capital for culture and politics. And then I decided to study something that could allow me the widest option possible. Cinema was not an option. I used to photography at the time already, but it was like a hobby. It was not something you seriously could imagine coming from a poor country like Haiti, you know, that, you know, you becoming an artist was something absolutely, you know, unavoidable. How to say, you can't tell anybody that you want to be an artist.
Right,
you know, you become a saltimbanque. So I went to Berlin and I studied engineering and economy. And on the side, which was basically more than 60% of my time, I was doing photography, journalism, politics. Berlin was really the capital of politics. I remember studying, I was 17. There were the people from all Latin America, Brazilian exile, people from Nicaragua, people from El Salvador,
wow. Okay.
Iranian, Turkish exile. So, and it was really, that's where I got my political, I would say, training. And it was a very huge place for the confrontation between the East and the West.
Right.
And it was always the place where people like Reagan would come to make their important speeches, but that's where he had also the biggest demonstration.
Yeah.
So it was really very important formative years for me, those years in Berlin.
Because, I mean, it's important. I mean, for me, it's interesting in thinking about how you grew up and how you formed your opinions of the world, because it's an unusual path for most filmmakers. For most filmmakers of prominence anyway, nowadays. is. In the last, I'd say 30 years, the filmmakers of prominence, it's not a, it's an unusual path to have all this education and have all this life experience. You didn't go into movies first.
Well, at the time, don't forget, when I finished, I think I was probably not the first generation, the second generation to go to film school. The first one were the people like Haile Gerima, Charles Burnett, Woodbury.
You mean black filmmakers?
Black filmmakers who went to UCLA. And I remember when I finished my first film, that's when Spike Lee had his first success with She's Gotta Have It. And my cameraman for my next project was Ernest Dickerson.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know you shot that.
Ernest, like 1 month before the shooting of my next film, he said he had to do Spike's next film.
Okay.
So, we were that generation who were basically, we had to trace differently a new path for us because nobody was expecting us. And for me, it was even more difficult because coming from Haiti, there was not such a thing as a Haitian film history.
Right. There was Arnold Antonin.
Arnold Antonin,
who did a different thing.
He was from the generation of militant cinema, what we called at a time where it was not important, if your camera was correct, if your sound was correct. It was about the content. It was very propagandist, and it was, it was the kind of film the time requires. Right. But I was in between, and it would have been very impossible for me to have the same approach, but because the audience was already very reluctant toward that kind of cinema. We were already, looking for a cleaner or more professional approach.
So how did you figure out a way once you'd had all these life experiences, and once you'd seen as much of the world as you'd seen, and you knew that you wanted to make movies, how did you figure out a way to make narrative features in a way that sort of aligned with how you viewed the world philosophically? Because you don't make conventional entertainment, there's a lot of entertainment there's entertainment in the film, and there's absorbing stories, but they're going at something larger than making me feel good as an audience member about going to the movie.
Well, the key for me is that I never wanted to make films because I wanted to tell stories. Film was, from the start for me, a way to make politics. Right. It was for me a way to fight. So I used the medium, but I knew that to use it, I have to give stories. I have to, create characters. So it was almost the other way around. My inspiration is not so much, my, design to tell story or to be in the film industry. In fact, I reluctantly belong to the film industry because, again, it's an industry who is, for me, primarily very conservative. It's not an industry, film has a lot to do with money. And when there is money, there is profit. So it's an industry where you have to fight if you want to keep some sort of sanity and you want to keep your vision as well. So my advantages is that since I start making film, I always knew that I could stop. I didn't make it like something I have to do or I die. Right. What was important for me is I need to be able to express myself, no matter how, whether it's through photography, film, writing. That was something I would fight for. But to be in the film industry itself, in fact, many times in my life, I decided for myself, I'm stopping making films. When for me, at the moment where I felt the energy I needed, the strength I needed to make films was overwhelmingly too much in regard to the impact or in regard to the return of it. Not the financial return, but the
satisfaction,
the creative return, or the political return.
Okay.
And I had time in my life where I refused to make a film, although I had the money to make it. So this gave me, incredibly enough, a lot of freedom. In this industry, when you have the freedom to say no, it's a tremendous freedom, because you cannot be bribed, you cannot be, how to say, faire du chantage. Somebody speak French?
Compromise?
No, faire du chantage.
Oh.
Blackmail.
Okay.
Yes. That's something that happened easily in this industry. Like it happened, to be in a production meeting and say, the producers or the financier would say, Raoul, we're sorry, you can't have this and this, and if it's like this, the film won't be made. Silence. I say, well, the film won't be made. And then two days later, they find a solution. So that's
Which
the
film
price.
did that happen? Is there a specific film where that kind of dialogue happened and you just wouldn't make the movie if you couldn't do it on your terms?
Yes, sometimes in April with HBO, and Lumumba as well. Yeah, well, but it's I would say it's not a gimmick. It's like playing poker. If you say, well, you pretend something, if you don't really believe it, the others will feel it.
Right.
So when you say, well, the film won't be made, you already have thought of the consequences and ready to accept those consequences, And that's what I talked about, the freedom. It's like, if you think that, oh my God, if I say no, if I don't make this film, I can't buy this new car I wanted, or my big apartment, I would have to live it, and you start thinking of all those consequences, basically economical consequence in your life. Right. Then you're not credible. And you have to be able to say, well, okay, I won't do another film, but then I can go teach, I can go do something else, and you have to, in a credible manner, convince yourself that your life is not going to end because you're not doing this particular film.
Right. And so a part of that being true to yourself and obeying your principles and your philosophy is you make films about politics in some ways, but I think what I love about your movies is that you found a specific angle on politics, which is power. Yeah. And the ways in which power both corrupts and oppresses and changes, and it's both abstract in some ways and very, very, very concrete and specific. Is that something, you're clearly aware of that in some ways, but is that something that you seek to winnow an idea down to?
It's something that I discovered in my film. I didn't have a plan to surround my work about, or to centralize my work about power. It's something that I think probably because my initial initiative was about, fighting, about Haiti primarily. When I studied in Europe, for me it was clear that I will go back to Haiti. My whole generation lived under that, plan, whatever it costs to go back to Haiti, whether undercover or in some sort of disguise or with whatever organization. But that was, the purpose. So for some reason, politics was included in my gene, in how I grew up, how I, not to get married in Germany while you're studying, not to have children. I almost had a you know, I almost fainted when I had to buy my first fridge, my first refrigerator, because I said, oh my God, what, you know, now I have this big thing, and you know, so that
Right.
was, you know, the way you lived at the time. So the whole, your whole daily life had, in Berlin, by example, you know, I had very good friends, yeah, a young union, student union chief from Brazil, who commit suicide in the same building we were all living in. So we were very close to what was happening, in particular in Latin America. It was a very tough time. It was, you know, time of dictatorship, time of military putsch. So when you come from those countries, you know, it would have been weird to say, I'm going to make horror movies, you know, or, you know, it was, you would not have many friends, you know, it's,
right.
You know, you would look weird. So, so for me, it was natural to, I grew up in that. I didn't question myself. I didn't have any plan. For me, that's what you do. You know, you know, you come from a privileged social background. So if you want to be able to look at your countryman in the eyes, you must be able to give something back. You know, you can't play, you know, the privileged son and forever. So it was just natural for.
Right, and I think that, you know, that's what separates you, and it puts you in a school of filmmaking that's different from other directors who have an international following. I think, you know, as an American, you really, you know, I see your films and you know, a couple dozen other directors' movies, and you wonder about the disconnection between the world that some directors live in and the world that people in the audience who go to see their movies live in. But I think that in the States, the idea of movies is totally different. I mean, not totally different than it is in the rest of the world, but I think at the premier filmmaker level, I think that attitude about what movies can do is different. I don't think they're meant to be agitation. They're meant to pacify. They're not meant to get people to go out and do things more than go out and see the films themselves.
Well, there are many filmmakers in the U.S. who really make a difference.
Yeah, they do, but that's not the filmmaking
but the
culture.
system itself is very powerful, and it's hard to resist.
Yes.
It's hard to resist, and unless you are able to say no without all the consequences, you know, it's difficult. I know, you know, I was a professor for 2 years at NYU, and I had very young students, you know, they were paying $40,000 for a semester for a profession with no guarantee that you would ever find a real job. And, you know, it's hard for them. At some point, they have the chance to make their first movie. And in particular, one particular guy, he had a lot of success. He did a film, but in fact, it was a very commercial film. He got a lot of success, and all the next 2 films were commercial. But the guy was totally unhappy because that's not what he wanted to do. You know, he wanted to be more an artist than, you know, than a commercial filmmaker. So at the same time, he was in a system that did not allow him, or maybe he didn't see any other way, you know, to make the choice that I was able to make.
Right.
But this is a reality in the U.S. system.
So when you were teaching, though, was that something that you, I mean, if I'm taking a class, you know, I almost went to NYU. They lost my application, so I wound up going somewhere else. But if I'm taking a class with you, though, what is it that you are encouraging me as a filmmaker to do? Like, where are you steering me?
Well, it's what I would particularly do is to make everybody understand that we are all unique. I mean, each one of you is unique, and that means you have to learn how to resist to whatever is trying to make of you a product. We are working in an industry that makes product. an industry who wants to use recipes.
Right.
And the only way you can really make a difference is when you try to discover who you are, what's your place in the world, what is, your use in the world, how can you resist to whatever is pushing you in a path, and why this path, why is it the only thing you can do, and why can't you just do something totally different? So that's the sort of I would call an independence of thoughts, independence of choice.
Right.
That's, for me, that's the fundamental. It was not about techniques. It was what I remember one of my first class where I choose a scene and we were supposed to work on the scene, and one or two students, they were kind of impatient because their only obsession was, okay, the scene is where are we going to put the cameras?
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, that's exactly that. As long as you don't even know what's going to happen in front of the camera, why are you staging two actors? What is the story between those two characters? Why are you doing this story, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter where you're going to put your camera. But that's a little bit how the system works. It's about, how do you control whatever you're doing,
right,
technically, financially, economically, but it's not so much because the content it's supposed to be already there, which the content is, as you say, is pacification, right, of the mind, and the whole Hollywood system, the way you tell a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's like totally contrary to the world or to the life of every one of you. We do have a beginning, a middle, and an end, but we don't know, right, each moment of this trajectory. But Hollywood wants to make you believe that it's included in this dramatic structure, and that you can't win, or you can win if you are a good guy.
Right.
But you have to follow the system. You have to follow the rules, and so as soon as you start breaking that dramatic structure, which is like cutting the one story in many smaller stories, or breaking the linear narrative, you're already playing with the system, mm-hmm, and that's what the system actually don't accept.
Right. So I want to get into the new film, but I also want to, before we do that, because it's in this important transition. You spent how long as the Minister of Culture in Haiti?
You telling it as if it's an evidence that everybody knows that.
Oh, Raoul
no.
was the Minister of Culture in Haiti for what years?
For 2 years.
Okay.
But again, that's what I tried to say at the beginning, is that you don't always choose, whatever you're going to do.
Right. I was going to ask how that happened.
Yeah, it was after Lumumba. Lumumba did not do well in France, although I thought it would be the place where the film would have been celebrated. Or it did well, but it didn't have the political impact, I thought. Mm-hmm. And
do you have any idea why that was?
Because there was some sort of rejection of black movies, of mm-hmm, African movies. It was the beginning of the end of African cinema. Mm-hmm. And also everything that was changing in the French distribution system, European distribution system. And so I went to the United States. I was offered this job at NYU, and the film did well in Toronto. It was bought by HBO. Mm-hmm. And HBO asked me to do an English version of the film. And no, what am I saying? That's much later. No, it was after my second film in Cannes.
Okay.
And for some reason, I couldn't make the film I wanted to make, and I decided to leave France to go to the US. I was offered a job. And after 2 years, I already had enough because, you know, I thought teaching was how you come back to the roots, that you will have a lot of intelligent students talking about film and, you know, bringing you new, you know, strength. But I must say honestly that I was deceived because, you know, you had to do with students that were already having their own problem, their own, you know, the role of money in that exchange. That, you know, how can you bring a student to take risk when he just paid $40,000, you know, for something? You know, you can't create an artist by, you know, in that kind of relationship. It was, I did have some great students, of course, but the system itself, you know, the whole. So that's the time as well I was very implicated in politics. You know, because we had the courage, probably the only time in our history that politicians resign.
Right.
Symbolically, it was great, and it moved up our rating. But I think it was a mistake. After a few years, I know that it was a mistake because we should have fought more.
It was a mistake to resign, or was it a mistake to...
It was a mistake to resign because basically what happened is what is the situation today as well, because we basically renounced to a numbers of political instrument that you have as a minister, that as a part of the civil society or even inside a party that you don't have.
Right.
You know, and we just as if we had renounced to those instruments, and that was a mistake.
So, but as the Minister of Culture, I mean, what did you and that team try to accomplish, you know, on the ground in terms of
Well, concretely, for me, it was basically I was in charge of state television, state radio, the state theater. I had 12 big cultural entity under me. And one of the big part was, of course, television and radio, which I wanted to become a public service, which was, even the term was not known in Haiti.
Right.
It's usually an instrument of propaganda. So that was something that I
so that automatically puts you in conflict
in conflict with the president, not the president, in fact, with Aristide in the background. Because, of course, I learned too late that, in fact, they wanted to keep the medias for their next elections. And so that was one of, among many other fights that we wanted to make the country strong enough in terms of its institution that it would not depend on what president gets to power.
Right.
You know, but this you cannot do in 1 year and 2 years. It needs at least 5 years to start seeing a result.
So is something that frustrates you, I mean, you would have known this before you became the culture minister of Haiti, but I've been talking to other filmmakers about the way in which their nations are depicted in movies, it's usually outside people coming in and telling the world what this place is like. Whether it's accurate or not, it usually doesn't involve a Haitian filmmaker telling that story. And Haiti is one of those countries where you get a lot of people coming from outside and interpreting Haiti and then giving that interpretation back to the world. And that idea and that problem, it can be a problem, is something that is politically the impetus behind the documentary in some ways, that you've made about what happened after the earthquake, which is, the world sort of descending upon Haiti after this natural disaster and trying to reshape it according to their own idea.
Well, the thing is, of course, Haiti, as many other countries, don't dominate its own storyline. Yes, everybody is telling our story. I think it's the same thing for a lot of Latin American countries.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see your countries on other screens, you don't really recognize it, or you recognize a monster, which is not, because it's it's a country like everybody else.
Or you see Will Smith or Dwayne Johnson running on top of your house.
Exactly.
And
And so I knew that for this film, I had to try to create a storyline that I'm more familiar with, that is, Haiti is not just, to reduce the image, Haiti is a majority of poor black people, a minority of rich, light-skinned people, and a group of corrupt politicians, And that's, of course, not the reality. The reality of Haiti is that you have a very strong civil society, a civil society that have managed to get rid of any dictatorship, whether it took 30 years or it took 4 years, all of them. And I have to remind people tend to not know that. Each time we had a major revolt, the people who were supporting the leaders, whether it was Duvalier, whether it was the generals, whether it was even Aristide, were the United States, France, Canada, and all those Western countries. 3 days before Aristide had to leave, I can maybe shortly give this example. There was a big meeting with the Haitian opposition and the civil society on a big table, and there was a loudspeaker, and we were all waiting for a call from Colin Powell.
Yeah.
And Colin Powell basically, started to say, whatever you decide are on this table, but the United States is not going to recognize any government that will not include Aristide. So you have to negotiate with him. So everybody around the table said, well, we have been trying to negotiate with him for the last 3 years. He never wanted to listen to us. Now that he's going to leave, whether it's in 2 weeks or in 6 months, there is no way we want to negotiate with him. So that was the common answer of everybody. So Colin Powell hung up. The French foreign minister called, he said the same thing. Nobody said they would accept that. And basically, the French and the American talked to each other, and they decided to drop Aristide. And that was 3 days before he left. So, and we know that that's how it happened, unless you keep, fighting against them. In fact, they are the one who wants to keep whoever is on power, and they want to be the one who decide who's the next one. And unfortunately for Haiti, a lot of the time the civil society is very strong in getting rid of leaders, but not so good in organizing the rest. And we usually get, the big brother usually get his next guy.
Right. Well, that's one of the things that's shocking about this movie, which is that, you manage to do something that I don't recall seeing in a film, which is make Bill Clinton look like a fool in some ways.
I didn't make him look
Well,
like a
right.
fool.
I mean, he doesn't come off particularly well in a way that is sort of beyond his control.
Well, that's the big tragedy, because Bill Clinton is probably, at least the Bill Clinton after his presidency, is probably one of the leaders who speak the most and the best about the North-South relation, about the mondialization and the problems of mondialization. But concretely, it's, in the case of Haiti, it's a lot of talk.
Mm-hmm.
And when we follow him, because he was in every meeting for 2 years, at one point it became a real joke for us, because a lot of the energy was there to make him look good,
Mm-hmm.
not to solve actual problems. Not that he's not trying to solve them, but
But
the
that wasn't-
primary goal of the whole team around him was to protect what they call themselves the Clinton brand. So they call what they were doing protecting the Clinton brand. I did not invent the word.
Right.
So at one point, you know, it's not a game. It's about people. It's about a country. It's you can't. So that's why I didn't, you know, try to restrain any of my commentaries. That it's because it's even, the reality is worse than I put it in the film, because I didn't want to destroy anybody. I didn't want to make, you know, everybody turn their back to Haiti. I wanted to start a discussion. So I tried to, you know, be as fair as possible.
But I mean, we talked about this the other day about the idea of fairness, though, about objectivity and that, and the problems you get into as a filmmaker and as an artist with the idea of having to be fair. I mean, your movie sees what it sees and it reports back to us. And I mean, there is a kind of, I mean, it's a refraction of events, but it's not. There's no agenda. I mean, your agenda is not to sort of tell both sides of a story. Your story is your job is to tell the story of what's happening to Haiti.
Yeah.
And
but that's something that might, and I don't know how many filmmakers or local filmmakers are here. What you're touching is something even more radical or fundamental. It's what I call the storytelling at the beginning. By the way, I don't know if there will be questions, because I would love to have
there'll be
exchange.
questions. We'll stop talking, you and I, in about 15 minutes, and we'll open it up to questions.
It's like, because like, let's say even a country like Colombia, which do not have a huge film history like many other countries, or at least not like country like Mexico, who really have, you know, a very great amount of tradition of filmmaking. And when you have to make a film about your country, you are like obliged to put everything you know in that one film, because there won't be like 5 or 10 others that will take part of the story. And that's the challenge that we all have when we are facing a huge worldwide enterprise, which is Hollywood enterprise, who have been disseminating its old storytelling the world over. And you have 1 hour and a half to tell your story, but not only to tell your story, your particular story, but all the things that happened before, you know, and it's very complicated. You know, let's take Haiti. With this, the cliche that exists about Haiti, I cannot make a film, or I cannot put in one film the whole history that happened before. That Haiti is poor today, not because the Haitians were dumb or they were lazy, or it's the result of our history, and not only our small little history, but Haiti being the second independent country of the whole continent. That means the first was the United States against the British, And the second was Haiti against the French, against the Spanish, and against the British. And imagine a little island where slaves fought against the biggest army of the time. They get their independence, and all around you have slavery. Latin American don't exist yet. So you have people like, you know, from all the rebel in the surrounding, they come to Haiti to rest, to get nurtured, to get weapon, to get men, to get ship. The first Haitian constitution, 1804, stated that any slave that set foot in Haiti becomes Haitian. That was, you know, something unacceptable. It's worse than Cuba today, or worse than Cuba in the 60s. So you have this country, small, that have to, we are right away under embargo. That means any ship is not allowed to make business with this new republic. So we are boycotted. So after 30 years of that, the Haitian government of the time, and don't forget that's the same time as the French Revolution. So in Europe, you have whole Europe trying to find what the republic means. It was not create, you know, the king is dead, you have to create a new economical system. In Europe, there is the war, Napoleon against all the rest of the kings of Europe, king and queens. It takes at least 50, 60 years for that to stabilize. We have none of this. You know, economy, slavery economy, the plantation are dead. The slave don't want to go back and work on plantation. So what do you create to keep your economic alive? So those are obstacles, real obstacles. And 30 years later, we have to negotiate with the French to pay for what they call the debt of Haiti toward France, which is the equivalent of something like 27 billions of today's money. So what does the Haitian government of the time did? We go to a bank because we don't have that money. So we loan that money, and we finish Haiti, the small Haiti, finish paying France that money after World War II.
Oh, the money that you borrowed.
The money we borrowed, we finished paying around 1956. Because of course, that kind of debt goes through banks. So it doesn't go directly to France, but we, like National City Bank, by example. We have been paying National City Bank for several decades. So that's the history of Haiti. It's not just we are poor and we are poor like this. So when, back to a story, when you make one film or two films, how many, you know, film you need to get that story out? Because history is totally repressed. Nobody wants that story to come out, you know. Even some of our friends, Venezuela, who did recognize the role of the Haitian Revolution, who did recognize the role of Haiti with Simon Bolivar, you know, but most of Latin America don't even know part of that story. And we have a collective story. You know, it's not like you have this small island in Haiti and you have all Latin America. We have a collective story. And the whole system made sure that we don't know about it and we don't see our common history. And maybe I think the subcontinent is changing. We are seeing the last 20 years big and important change, and I hope that we see other links of communities, of common economical agreements, and let's see how far it will go. But that's part of our common heritage. I was very long, I'm sorry.
No, but is that something that you, yeah. Is that something, Is that a conversation that you have with other filmmakers who, I mean, ideologically minded, or who are as ideologically minded as you are?
Yes, we talked a lot. It's a small group, so
yes.
But we, not specifically about Haiti or our respective country, but the problem is the same for my African filmmaker colleagues. It's, you know, how do you tell the story of a whole continent and where you have been excluded? When I did Lumumba, about the assassination of Patrice Lumumba in '61, there was one Congolese historian I could work with, not 10, one that had, you know, enough background to be able to research that time. So everything had to be done, and it's a common. I mean, even no, you can't say. European cinema is dominated by American cinema mostly. There are very few countries that still have more than 20% of their local production on the screen. France is the only one who still have at least 40–45% of French film.
And they had to pass a law to, I mean,
there is a law, there is a structure.
That's the government sort of keeping American movies out. Too,
that allows that. So it's really hard to resist on that. You know, how many countries don't even have one image about their own history? And if you are a young Colombian as well, you know, I'm sure a lot of your archive are in New York or in London. And you don't, to have access to it, you have to pay, you know, $2–3,000 to just learn what they have, you know, before they send you a listing, some tapes. So you don't own your history, you know, and that's the case most of the world, you know, and I do hope that we will be able to catch up some of it, you know. People think that internet is the answer. I don't think so, because even if you can get stuff on the internet, but you don't have the rights, so you can deal with it on the internet, but you can't give access as easily to it, and they will sue you, quite simply. So it's a big problem, and that's not, you know, there are reasons why the Americans put so much energy into their film industry. It's you know, it's huge. After armament and I think there are a few things, and then comes cinema. Those are billions worldwide. So, and it's vehiculate not just entertainment, it's economic, it's vehiculate products, it's a vehiculate a way of life, it's vehiculate a way to see the rest of the world. And you know, you can, all of you can for itself remember the film you were seeing when you were kids. Like, you know, when you saw a Latino, you knew he would be killed after 15 minutes into the film. You know, the same for black people, you know, like it was like 5 minutes.
Wait, or you knew he was going to do the killing. It's like, he's either going to die or kill somebody. Those are your two options.
You know, if we would do the...
Or bring somebody coffee. Those are your three options. Kill, die, serve. There's a...
And if you do the body count of Hollywood movies throughout the centuries, I mean, the decades, you would see, you know, this storytelling as well. You know, like there was a time recently, most of the guys dying in movies were Arabs. You know, now it's changing. I think it's more Eastern European. So this is ideology. It's not innocent. You know, even horror films, it's the same about women as well. You know, you can see throughout the history of cinema what role, you know, women have played, and how quick they are killed and how they are killed. You know, the technicity of it as well. So film is not innocent. There is no film, as you know, sometimes people say, oh, that's just entertainment. Yes, no, that's as well ideology.
So why don't we turn it over to questions for people who have them. There's a microphone that's circulating. That's.
There is one here and one here. Yeah? No, I understand a little bit, so.
Yo, sí. More than a question is a comment. I think it's very important your work. So, here in Colombia, have an emerging.
You can speak in Spanish, and I'll.
Bueno,
No, go ahead.
bueno, sí, sí. Bueno, digamos que en Colombia se tiene un imaginario, bueno, perdón, en Colombia no, en el extranjero, hasta hace poco se tenía un imaginario de que por lo menos no habían personas afro en Colombia. O sea, me decían amigos que viajaban a Estados Unidos que, bueno, si tú eres de este color, tú eres colombiano, es como raro, es extraño. Pero digamos que últimamente, gracias al efecto Obama, digamos, se han logrado ciertos espacios y también, digamos, se está generando un movimiento a nivel local en términos de la visibilidad de la población afro en el cine y en la televisión. Por lo menos yo hago parte de un proceso que está como intentando rescatar o está intentando buscar todas esas historias que la gente sobre la población negra que nos están contando y cómo poder cómo poder mostrar eso, poder mostrarle a la comunidad negra que en primer lugar es como mostrarles referentes, no solamente vernos como el personaje que está trabajando.
Try to ask the question, because otherwise I get what you want to say, but.
Bueno, sí. Bueno, sí, básicamente el comentario, por eso decía, es más que una pregunta, era un comentario. Simplemente quería como aclarar que también, que digamos la situación aquí en Colombia es diferente, pero también se están generando movimientos en el ámbito cinematográfico. Me parece que, digamos que parte del trabajo ahorita es como articular, como tomar ejemplo de lo que estás haciendo y de otros países, creo yo.
Yeah. There are other questions, but just shortly, I mean, this fight about representation in cinema, it was like this everywhere. In the United States, a lot of people criticize Spike Lee sometimes for some of his film, but one thing that he did, he made sure that black people, Latinos, Chinese people went into the unions in the US. And he opened the way for a lot of today's black star, Jamie Foxx, what's her name, Halle Berry, Wesley Snipes, Denzel Washington. He did open doors for a lot of people. So, but it needs that kind of energy and that kind of fight to impose, and not only on one side of the camera, but on all the sides, including the money side.
Señor Raoul Peck, bienvenido, señor Raoul Peck, muy buenas tardes, bienvenido al Festival Internacional de Cine de Cartagena en su versión número 53. Mire, la pregunta, don Raúl, ¿cuál fue su primera película norteamericana en sus comienzos para usted en su historia?
¿Cuál es la primera?
¿Cuál fue la primera película para usted en su comienzo en su historia, en la historia del cine?
My first film, I think it was screened here, Haitian Corner. I did with German money. I was still a film student, but it's a film that I shot in Brooklyn, in the Haitian community of Brooklyn. And it was a very low budget, but it was a great film to start with, and I got selected by the Berlin Film Festival at the Forum, and that was the beginning of my career. Yeah. Yes?
Sí, como ministro de Cultura, la pregunta que me hago es, ¿qué hizo usted para, usted dijo la expresión institucionalizar el país, era el objetivo del gabinete en el que estaba? ¿Qué hicieron como ministro de Cultura? ¿Qué funcionó, qué no funcionó y qué hubiera hecho distinto?
It's a long story, but again, the fight, and it was not just my individual fight, was how do we install the most institution possible in a country that have been the place for so many changes and fights and etc. And again, the example with state television was very important because I had to first put everybody around the table, you know, producers, functionaries, technicians. I tried to have some sort of trust among us, although they were all suspect because they had all Aristide in their mind. I had to go in front of the Senate. I had to, the Cultural Commission in Senate, try to explain to them, try to hear what they had to say. So it's really a lot of different work, and you know, don't think that one person changes anything. You need everybody. And in fact, we were a government that had the power to change a lot of things, but that was not the, you know, the purpose. I could, one of the idea was to tax every cultural good that comes into the country, to take maybe a 0.5% or 1% and put it in a cultural fund. And that cultural fund will
Probando, 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 probando. Probando, probando, 1, 2, 3, probando, 1, 2, 3.
Y Wellesley Morris, ¿esto está funcionando? ¿Sí? Bueno. Wellesley Morris es un crítico de cine que trabaja en este momento como crítico cultural de cine y deportivo para una publicación en Boston que se llama Grantland. Trabajó por muchos años para el Boston Globe, donde se ganó un Pulitzer Prize. Y Raoul Peck, no sé si entre ustedes necesita introducción, pero yo sí quisiera agradecerle a la Embajada de Francia en Colombia y a la Cinémathèque Afrique, Institut francés. Me imagino que es la Cinemateca Africana del Instituto Francés. Gracias a ellos tenemos el gran honor y privilegio de tener a Raoul Peck con nosotros en Cartagena. Gracias a Raúl por venir. Gracias a tu presencia, Raúl, en Cartagena. Podemos hacer una retrospectiva de la obra del director que sorprendentemente, pues ninguna prácticamente de sus películas se había mostrado en el pasado en el país. Yo pienso que así la obra de Raúl, quien se preocupa sobre todo por temas sociales y políticos, ha estado basada en países como Haití, como el Congo, como Ruanda, tiene una resonancia importante en Colombia, sobre todo en una ciudad como Cartagena. Entonces, sí, me parece que es un absoluto privilegio y les recomiendo que vean la mayor cantidad de películas posibles en su retrospectiva y los dejo entonces aquí con este diálogo. Vamos a necesitar entonces traducción simultánea, va a ser en inglés la charla, will be in English.
Sí. That's the most Spanish that I'm going to speak today, so sorry. Do you